So while I'm undoing this tangle and heading back to the car, I thought I'd tell you guys a little bit about how I got into fishing. Honestly, a lot of it is happenstance. So I grew up 1 mile off of Lake St. Clair, and I had a ton of different interests growing up. I was interested in falconry, I was interested in archery, I was interested in scuba diving, in big wave surfing, archaeology, airplanes, all the things that young men tend to be interested in. And I'm sure if I were a multi-generational wealthy individual, I would have pursued all of those interests and maybe I wouldn't be fishing these days, but I'm not. And I grew up a mile away from a lake with a fishing shop at the end of my street. So as soon as I started being able to do things like mow lawns and do some construction, demo, and cleanup work, I had spending cash, and so I'd go to the end of the street and I'd buy fishing gear. And I got to credit books from the library for initially getting me interested in it. Probably my grandfather as well, because he was an outdoorsman for a long time, and he did take us out kind of like fishing light, I guess you'd call it. So we'd go to my aunt's house and he'd have cane poles set up and things like that. There's this thing where my younger brother kept constantly falling into the water anytime we'd go fishing, until we finally realized he was doing it on purpose. That included ice fishing. And so really I ended up teaching myself how to fish. So I would read books, I'd watch shows on the Outdoor Network, fishing magazines. I talked to the tackle shop owner at the end of the street. He's probably wondering where this kid's coming in with all these quarters and whatever I came in there with. Always buying up spinners and nickel spinner baits, but that was what I did. And I'd hop on my bike, I'd grab my fishing pole, my backpack full of lures, and I would just catch bass after bass after bass once I figured it out. And it took me a while. It took me about a good year to catch my first bass. It took me about a good year to catch my first steelhead. I think I'm up to about 20 so far this season now. So that's, I started when I was about 12 years old, 41 now. So it's something that you develop skill in over time. And as far as the reason I kept doing it, one is probably a little bit of a dopamine addict, and I don't think there's a sport out there that is quite as stimulating for dopamine addicts as fishing. It's really similar to that kind of Facebook feed or gaming or gambling sort of rush that you get, which is a dopamine rush. So people who are addicted to cocaine, people who are addicted to, caught on a line there, people who are addicted to gambling, people who are addicted to social media, what they're actually addicted to is a hit of dopamine. And, in the case of cocaine, it just happens through the stimulation of norepinephrine coupled with dopamine. So you get an adrenaline hit along with that one as well. But for things like social media, it's that novelty seeking. So, the next thing, the next funny joke, the next pretty girl, next pretty boy, whatever it is you're into, seeing that scroll through on your feed. The likes that you get, the social confirmation, it's that anticipation followed by you maybe or maybe not seeing something that you like, or getting positive affirmation. You might get likes on your post, you might not. And that dopamine is what you get when you have that anticipation as to whether or not you might or might not get that like on that post that you made, and whether or not I catch a fish on this cast. So I'm anticipating it. It's actually kind of stressful. Fishing can be very frustrating and stressful, but then you get the fish, you get that dopamine rush, and it's very rewarding. Now, the difference being that for gambling, for social media, all of these things are zero positive utility for survival value as a human being. Now, when I go fishing, that has a literal positive survival benefit for me, for my friends and family. There's a number of people this year who've told me that the fish that I've caught has been the best tasting fish that they've ever eaten. And that's why humans are susceptible to things like social media addiction, to cocaine addiction, to gambling addiction. It's because we're designed to seek out positive neurochemistry through our actions. And the difference between the past and the present is that there are very few instances where this dopamine seeking creates positive survival value for us. So I think fishing, if somebody is having issues with social media, with gambling, with porn, whatever it is that they're addicted to, it's a good addiction to swap. I don't know if it's going to get rid of the other ones necessarily, but at least it gets you outside and it gets you some food once you get good at it. And it gets you connected to nature, because ultimately these are the reasons why we're susceptible to those different addictive ills, is because we're designed to be present in nature. We're designed to be a part of it. We're designed to have a certain amount of empathy for the natural world around us. We can drum that out of ourselves if we choose to, or if we never learn to develop that connection to nature in the first place. So there's an aspect, I think, of being a good fisherman that means that you must become either a good sportsman. It's one way to put it. I don't like that term as much, because to me, when I think about a sportsman, I think about someone who's really set on following rules. A lot of times those rules are there for a good reason. The ethics that we have around sportsmanship, they're useful. They have utility in ensuring that we don't overuse the resource, that we don't waste. And those are good rules to adhere to. But I think there's something that goes deeper than that, which is just simply being a good human being. And that means something. That it's the idea that as a human being connected to the natural world around us, we feel pain when it feels pain. We feel loss when something passes as a result of our actions. We feel responsible for the deer herd because we identify it as part of ourselves. And I wrote a little bit about this in my book, Operating System Nature, The Birth of the Tradition. So in the past, and even still present today, what you focus on will become something that you merge with in terms of your mirror neuron network in your brain. So there's this mirror neuron network where you can watch someone perform a task, and your brain will subtly perform that task inside of your own head for you. So this is the reason why you can watch someone play basketball, and if you've never played basketball before, you're going to be better at taking your first basketball shot than someone who's never seen anyone shoot a hoop, and you give them a ball and tell them to throw a basket. It's the reason why animals can learn to mimic us. It's the reason why we can learn to mimic animals. So what was thought was that in the past, when people were out hunting, they were deeply focused in a flow state on the world around them. And that happens when you're fishing too. And as a result of that, that mirror neuron network activity coupled with that flow state puts you in a sort of mild psychedelic trance state, and you merge with the surroundings around you and you identify with them. And you can feel pain and loss at the passing of a creature at your hands as a result of it. So you might shoot a deer and you might feel a sense of grief for death or loss within yourself as you watch that deer pass because you were so intently focused on it for a time. And I've seen that happen with fish where I was very intently focused on fishing this one instance and caught a very nice smallmouth bass. It was with my grandfather and had it on the stringer. And I just kept looking at that fish and looking at its eye, and I just kept feeling terrible that I had it on the stringer. And I've eaten so many fish over my lifetime. But this particular one I had a deeper sort of connection with. And I asked my grandpa, I was like, hey, you know, I don't feel like keeping this fish. Like, I kind of feel like it wants to live and I should let it go. And he says, I think that's a good thing. And I'm really glad he said that. And we let that fish go, and he said that he felt bad for that fish too. And I don't know if he was just trying to make me feel better, but I know at a certain point in his life, he actually gave up on hunting. He switched over to photography, and I think he got to that point. He got that point where he felt enough affinity with the natural world and realized that he didn't need to kill deer to eat. We had plenty of ability to get meat from the grocery store. And granted, I love venison. I think it's a better quality food, but for him, there came a time in his life where the drive to hunt was not as powerful as the drive to watch things live and thrive. So that's a little bit about why I fish.